you're trained, but not for this. So, and I didn't know what the word caregiving really was.
Mm.
So I show up, my mother's 4 a.m. frantic in the front of her home. She's kind of moving furniture out of her house. And I'm like, what's wrong? Rushed to the hospital. They said we saved her life, but that was the night that kind of went downhill spiral. And the progression went so quickly.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, and I am passionate about storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. I'm so happy to have a special guest on the show today, George Ackerman, lovingly known to many as Sharon's son, George. George is here to share his journey from caregiver of his mother, who has Parkinson's disease, to being someone who advocates for people with Parkinson's disease around the world and the people who love and care for them as well. Dr. Ackerman is the author of A Son's Journey from Parkinson's Disease Caregiver to Advocate, the creator of the organization Together for Sharon, and the host of the podcast Together for Sharon. We are grateful to have George here today to share his story and talk about his mission to advocate for people touched by Parkinson's disease and work towards a cure. George, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor to, meet you, but really your time and your audience mean the world to me, and so many, not just in the US, but throughout the world, who unfortunately feel alone in this fight. And that's what I'm here, and I hope we are, obviously, to tell everyone listening, whether you have Parkinson's or not, whether you have a friend or not, whether it affects you and your family or community, this topic is something I think needs to be brought to the forefront throughout the world, and together we can find a cure.
I love you sharing your story with people, even in moments that it might feel very vulnerable and even painful, because some parts of it are full of joy and hope, and other parts are full of grief and challenges for you and your family and your mother. I want to just point out how you're going by Sharon's son, George. It really embodies the ideals behind being a caregiver, and really your daily life for many years now has been to embody being a caregiver, even after your mother's death. Can you give me and the audience some backdrop as to when your mother was diagnosed and how you ended up on this journey of advocating?
Yeah, I mean, the number 2 or 3 answers, there's a few, is I felt alone as a caregiver, and my mother felt alone as someone diagnosed with Parkinson's. And actually, for the first time after 4 years or almost five, it just hit me the other day that because I'm doing a show, I'm meeting so many individuals in the field and they become family, that I wonder what it would have been like for my mother and I to have spoken at the time to someone diagnosed. Because honestly, we didn't even think of it. Like, we were just so wrapped up in the doctors and the disease progressing. I don't understand why it progressed even to now so quickly, because every journey is different. And as you know, the medical community, which unfortunately we didn't prove true for us, but they do say, you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. But my mother died, passed at age 69. She was very young, didn't have any medical issues for most of her life. She had Parkinson's about 15 years. For the first 7, I almost say she's selfless and just kind of a little stubborn, but she didn't tell me about it. I heard the word Parkinson, right? And I didn't even know there was a disease. So, because for for her whole life, for as adulthood, she was unfortunately divorced, but she lived independently. She was a very strong woman. She's still my hero, always will be. And, she just said, and I think she mentioned she didn't want to burden the family. I wish she did. Though for 7 years she had it, didn't know much. Towards the 5th year, she finally started having stiffness in the left arm, and it didn't affect her independence, but it did affect almost eating, where we would eat out with our family, and she had trouble cutting food, and I was concerned. So that's the first time I heard it was a disease, but I didn't worry because, again, we were told by medical experts, and I love them all because it's not their fault. I blame the disease, but that you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. So in my kind of world, I was thinking, she has it, it'll be tough, but, it would never be a big problem. We'd still have my mother. And then, and honestly, this month is very, even more hard, difficult, because September 20th would have been her birthday.
Mm.
And I visit her grave and things, and not, there is a lot of light and positive that's come from this whole thing, but the sadness is, I lost my best friend, and I joke if we get to my background, I'm a lawyer and a police officer, and I have a PhD, but I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, and I can talk to you now, but I'll go in the other room, go to my wife, and sometimes I fall apart because it's tough. And if we get to the book, the reason for the cover, I'd love to talk about that. But anyway,
Mm.
so the worst part of this was the last 4 years. So we tried a lot of things, and I think everything. Looking back, there's nothing we could have done today. So she went to special university for a trial for Parkinson's, and that night it changed my life. So the sad part here, if we were writing a story or movie, just imagine, if you will, if I'll do my prosecutor shoes here, and imagine, if you will, you're just sleeping, you get a frantic call at 4 a.m. My father was in New York, my mother's in Florida with me, lived not too far, like 10 minutes, and he's kind of screaming, not at me, but with me, and saying, you got to rush over to your mother's house. So I've dropped everything, rushed over. As a police officer reserve now, you're trained, but not for this. So, and I didn't know what the word caregiving really was.
Mm.
So I show up, my mother's at 4 a.m. frantic in the front of her home. She's kind of moving furniture out of her house. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she said she thinks there's Nazis inside her home and they're going to harm her. And my mouth dropped and I didn't know what the heck to do. Rushed to the hospital. They said we saved her life, but that was the night that kind of went downhill spiral. And the progression went so quickly, I think medical science wouldn't even understand. And that's when the night I became her caregiver. And that wasn't even the worst part. To finish up, the worst part was I went back to her home to get her some clothes. I never really went in her home because I wanted her bedroom. I wanted her privacy. But when I went to get her clothes, imagine the movie Beautiful Mind, but the room was surrounded by little post-it notes. And on most of the notes were names of animals and people who were no longer with us. And she wasn't able to appreciate at times due to delusions and hallucinations what was reality. And I never heard of that. I never even. So that was like the night I kind of broke down. I was thankful she was still with us, but never expected what was to come.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know that must be so difficult to go over that memory. When was that in the course of you? Is that when you first learned about the Parkinson's beyond what you'd seen, at dinner, like you said, with some stiffness, or had you known about Parkinson's before that night?
I mean, I saw things such as dystonia and dyskinesia, stiffness,
Mm.
but my mother wouldn't tell me. Like, we spent a lot of time together. I work a lot, but I would always make time. We spoke 7 times a day on the phone. I was like, I need the shirt that said I'm a proud mama's boy. It's like, we spoke more than I believe I've been told more people, but I shared everything with her. I don't feel I'd be the man I am today or have any success that I do or be the advocate I am if it wasn't for her sacrifice. She was a beautiful person inside and out, but she was a school teacher, had a master's degree, and literally dropped it all so that she could raise me and my brother. And that's something that kind of hit me that night, realizing that, this is my time to step up and be there and be her support.
Well, and thank goodness that you were there, that your dad could call you and tell you to rush over there, and you were there, because obviously we know that when we're having these delusions, when we're having this disordered perception of what's going on in our reality, that certainly can lead to dangerous situations with other people, falls, injuries, that sort of thing. So take us through, if it's all right with you, what happened next. So she goes to the hospital, she's diagnosed. Was there something that was inciting that incident, like a UTI or anything that had pushed her over the edge?
There you go. Like, honestly, most shows I don't talk about it. One, I don't
Hmm.
know if people understand it. And number two, I'm not, aware a lot, but that was the number one thing. And I know that I can't talk about the medical behind it, but that was the number one thing they told us about. I still don't understand a lot about it, but it was shocking
Hmm.
how she had, before that night, she was walking a few miles. After the night, she went to a rehab center for a week or two and hated it. But then when she got home, she literally went to a cane for 2 years, then a walker for a year, then a wheelchair. And the last 7 days was something like we wouldn't even be able to discuss. 7 days bedbound, but didn't have anything more than a heartbeat. Wasn't alive really, even though medically I guess she was alive. It was just things that you don't ever dream of or I don't understand. So yes, the answer for that is the UTI, and I just am shocked at that. I think that they drastically changed her medicines too quickly. When you go on a trial, and this is a recommendation, not something I'm telling people because you have to see your own medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, but I think if you're going through a trial, you need to like either live next to it or be local. Because my mother, it was I don't want to give too much away, even in the book I don't mention. But we lived in South Florida. This place was about 2 hours, 3 hours away, and I know she didn't want to be there, so she went, did something, and came home the same night. And then look what happened. And I called the doctor, and this person is an expert in Parkinson's, so I don't want to again name them. I do appreciate what they do for others, but I don't feel like that we had much help after she went home. Maybe she should have stayed there, but I don't feel like even the nurses and people involved didn't really call us back. Didn't explain it. I remember now, even having one or two calls, no one really seemed to help. So I felt a little abandoned, and from that point on, it just again every day was something worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what I'm hearing you say, and I've heard you talk about this before and other opportunities you've had to speak about your mother's course and kind of the surprise that you had. I'm being told this is a slowly progressive disease, and often it is, but your mom was also presenting in the unique circumstances, sounds like, of later disease, right? And then it can feel like it's going really fast. And unfortunately, sometimes we really only truly recognize it in those later moments. And the tools we have are different than the tools we have earlier. And so I think it's really important for you to share your experience as a caregiver, as a loving son, because someone might be listening to you speak about this and they may have early stages of Parkinson's disease. And they have the autonomy to decide how they want to share that information, right? And that's so important that they have that. But I also think it's important for them to have the information, to hear your experience, to say, listen, if only I'd known sooner, because I would have loved to be there to support mom. She wouldn't have been a burden for me. I would have just had different tools. And I think that's a really helpful thing to share for someone who maybe is wanting to share this information, but holding back out of fear of judgment or something else behind that.
Yeah, I'm very open and honest. I have nothing to hide. Even together with Sharon.com, it's not an organization, it's just me and one son lost his best friend due to the disease. We started it just to kind of, you know, remember her. And I thought maybe a few people would see it and I'd be happy with that. But it's a little secret, but if you look on the bottom of the screen somewhere on the front page, we've had over almost 40,000 people visit the site. So I don't know if it's because of some of the work we've done, her journey, or that unfortunately the disease is one of the fastest growing and progressing in the world, not just the US, with about 1 million in the US, but 10 million out of the US, which is kind of also when I found that out was heartbreaking. And, I feel like we have to be a family in this fight for a cure. 99.9% of the people I've met agree, but there are actually a few that don't want to be family in the fight, which is also kind of heartbreaking. And I always say the journey, what keeps me going is seeing inspiration from others who are still battling and even advocates and other individuals doing incredible things. But to answer your question and to rewind a little, the number one thing I didn't know and wish I did was how important and was exercise and how it could slow the progression. We don't have a cure, but that is literal research and fact. But my mother did have a gym in her home, and we did try, but it wasn't like she was religious with it. She did, use the little machine like this, but I'm more of a, I don't know, athlete, but, I've had a lot of surgeries lately. I'm not able to do much, but I've lived in fitness my whole life, and I know how, even for caregivers, critical fitness, health, diet is for just, not just those diagnosed, but also for caregivers, but really for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that especially in Parkinson's, but not only in Parkinson's, the old saying, the body in motion stays in motion, right? This tenet of physics is so True. And the body at rest stays at rest. And when we have less dopamine in our brain, when we have less of the chemical that's required to get things moving, to send the signals to our body to move our body and to coordinate those movements the best way for our balance, for our safety, to achieve the goals we're trying to with the way we move. We call it our motor function. So when we have the degeneration that happens with Parkinson's disease, I liken it to there's less oil, right? We've still got the mechanisms of the bicycle, but we're missing something to kind of grease the gears. And so sometimes medications can work for that, right? But also just moving them. So getting back to this thought about it almost being like a bicycle, if you don't move those mechanisms, they're not going to work as properly, right? They're going to have a hard time going. So when you are really intentional about consistently bringing motion into your life. Now, some people hear that and they think, well, listen, I'm already having a hard time moving and you're asking me to move. I'm telling you, that's my problem. What are you saying, Dr. Shafer? That doesn't make any sense. But, start where you are at. And so that's why I think it's so important, the work you're doing on your podcast too, where you've had a physical therapist come on and talk about the importance of exercise and Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, one thing that's important, again, we spoke, but I'd be honored to have you on the show because I haven't had a neurologist, and that's something obviously that's important. In my opinion, might be one of the most important, but I feel it's important that whether it's an organization, a foundation, association, we don't accept money. I only accept that I don't want anyone out there in the world to feel alone. I felt alone as a caregiver, and my mother certainly did as someone diagnosed with Parkinson. But just think of this quick scenario. I mean, imagine there's a little city who has a beautiful organization and offers incredible resources, but guess what? People out there just aren't aware, and it's not the organization's fault. Maybe they just didn't reach it. Well, what if there's someone like me who literally wants to help people for free, for volunteer? I won't curse, but I don't want anything, darn thing in return, literally, except that that person, that community knows about them. That's it. And I'm shocked in 2024 that I still get a few people that just don't want to, work together, which is shocking. I feel like it is tough to tell people that I don't want anything, which you shouldn't have to in 2024, but it's, just some of the downfalls of being an advocate when you don't have a foundation. And I didn't want to start a foundation on purpose. If you go to togetherforsharon.com, you'll see a few organizations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Our family has donated about $30,000 to various foundations from our own pocket. We don't want anything but a cure. Obviously, it can't bring my mother back, but I don't want anyone to ever go through what my mother or our family has. And that's really it. There's no like kind of Shark Tank, but wait, there's more. And it's I'm writing a book about this because there's 99.9% has been having some of the people become family with me, and I text some of the individuals who have Parkinson 24/7 when they come on my show. It's just it might be 30 minutes and that's it, but that reaches so many people, and I hope everyone listening today supports the doctor, not just my show, because again, I just want those out there to hear it and know about it, but you have to also support the doctor because what she's doing is incredible. And I always say if we could just reach one person today through this show and even my sharing it, we've changed the world for that person. And like, how could you say no to that? And that's so it is heartbreaking at times to advocate, which is, most people, to be honest, you don't get paid. I'm spending 24/7. There's nights I don't sleep because I miss my mother, but I try and think of new ideas to spark people's attention. Just the other night, a person with Parkinson who'd become a family friend of mine, his dog passed. So I'm sitting there thinking, this is terrible. We love our pets, and pets are great therapy. Why not add a section on Together for Sharon about pets? So literally within 1 hour of a night, just the other day, I added a whole section under, if you go to Together for Sharon, I think click either media and pets, you'll see about 7 or 8 people with Parkinson's and their pets. And it's just beautiful. And that's the kind of stuff that drives me to keep doing it. But it's like anything, maybe medical profession, even law, or a professor, a teacher. You'll have like 4,000 amazing evaluations, but that one that was negative, it's like, I don't want to do, why am I doing this? So, and this one kind of breaks my heart because this is, again, I don't gain anything from this. I just want a cure for everyone else.
Mm. Well, I want to really focus on something that you've said, and I've heard you discuss it before, how you aren't raising money, you're not asking for money, you don't have a foundation, you have your organization that's doing important work, and a part of that work is to highlight that these other foundations and organizations exist too, and to help people learn about them and make decisions about how they want to support them.
Yeah, I mean that's the I have to announce too. It's exciting because I started a podcast. I never dreamt I'd have one, and I didn't really want one. But I realize again there are voices out there who don't have any say, or due to the disease they can't talk. Some individuals. So I wanted to be in a way, and I'm not speaking for them, but a voice. To have a platform so they can speak, or advocates or doctors, and it's only literally for Parkinson's. So extremely small segment of the population, and part of I don't do it for views or likes. I don't care about that, but I think it's just so important. So, and before the podcast world, I actually so I did something else which is exciting to announce, which I mentioned to you. I wrote my first book called The Son's Journey, and this is it. But this one was very important to me, and it's most important. I don't think I already have a few more coming. Nothing will ever be like that because that was about my mother, her life, her struggles, my caregiving, and then today advocate. But even the picture I chose, this is my mother and I, and this is at the mother-son dance during my wedding, which is one of the memories I'll never forget. It was literally one of my favorite in my life. But it's the 2 3 minutes that Parkinson's disease kind of didn't exist and didn't matter. My mother looked beautiful and always did, but she was all dressed up. We were just dancing and laughing and talking through the whole song, and just no one else. It was like in the movies where the whole world just stops and it's just us. Obviously, I love my wife and my kids. They weren't around then. That was the one moment. So even talking about it is not easy, but I picked that photo literally for that purpose. So I dream that my mother's memory is never forgotten because of the disease. Most people might pass normally, or I don't know, normal, but so quietly and naturally. But she didn't. She had a very tough time, and the last year I kept a specific journal with dates, timestamp, and one of the chapters is literally from the voice of the caregiver myself, taking you through the last year journey, which is a chapter I always say you might want to skip, but it's just something that isn't out there. And to be shocked even more, I was not going to write a book because, again, I didn't want to just throw another book out there, and I don't care about the money. But I don't know if you're aware, but I always say, everyone, please challenge you. Tell me if I'm wrong, write me. There's not one book in the world, like literally Amazon, the world, that is from a son or even a daughter, but from a son that lost a loved one due to Parkinson's. And I find that shocking because sitting here, I don't have Parkinson's. I'm no longer a caregiver of someone alive with it. But I feel this, 20 million, 30, 50 million people who lost a loved one due to Parkinson's. And that's another book I'm working on because I feel that at some days the door is kind of shut for people like me, and we're not really thought of or even want our voice because it's kind of the tougher topics and the things that people don't want to hear. And I completely understand, but imagine if we brought all these people back to the fray or to the conversation, I think we would be much closer to a cure.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we podcast. That's why we have these conversations, because we want to share these stories, because we know there's someone that will hear them and they'll feel this sense of belonging and of community, and that they're not alone. And it's so incredibly important. And I wanted to highlight for listeners who maybe don't have any experience with Parkinson's disease and some of the symptoms that can present themselves as someone is coping with this illness. And again, they're having the changes in their brain that lead to this problem. One common sign or symptom that people experience is something that's called masked faces. So they're less expressive. They maybe smile less and they often blink less. And it's an interesting experience as it's been discussed with me by patients and their caregivers, their loved ones, that sometimes there's an issue with communication, especially early on when masked faces begins, or this decreased amount of expressivity in the face, because let's say it's a couple and the loved one says, I think they're depressed and they're not communicating with me in the way that they did. And the person who has Parkinson's would not unusually say, I'm actually quite fine. My medicine is helping me move better. I'm exercising more. I'm really trying with my diet. I feel like I'm actually pretty fine, but I am distressed that my partner is looking at me and feeling like I'm upset all the time. And you hear this over and over again, because something that many people don't know is that we communicate so much with not just the words we say, but with our tone, which tone can be affected too in Parkinson's disease, with how fast we speak, how slow we speak, with how our face is expressing, how our body is moving. And all of these things can be affected in Parkinson's disease. And this is another experience that I've heard with families and with people in this community, that if we understood it better, it might help allay some of that emotional response we have to the disease. So again, we say, okay, we need to actually verbalize how we're feeling, right? I need to ask instead of assume how my mom's feeling, how my partner's feeling, because maybe right now there's no way for me to know and read them the way I could have a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was excited to speak with you on the show, because you actually brought up masking, which is something I don't even get the time to talk about. And, as you know, there's 5 stages of Parkinson's. The biggest thing, not to get in depth, but if anyone doesn't know what Parkinson's is, the first few stages, 1 to 3, where you'll see movement symptoms. But the biggest one is, Mr. Michael J. Fox. Everyone thinks Parkinson's is just the external tremors, which is already tough. My mother had more internal till towards the last year, and then she did have external. But every journey
Mm-hmm.
and every individual is so different. I think that's why we don't have a cure. But there are other symptoms such as rigidity, bradykinesia. Those are the famous ones, or body stiffness. And then the masking is huge, which we don't even get, a lot of time to talk about. But the biggest ones, which are tougher, when you get to stage 4 and 5, because that's when independence is virtually impossible. And that's when, I even had to take my mother's car keys away, which she was an independent woman. That's the end. Like, I know, not the kid, but I know I can't go anywhere without my car keys because I want to go home. I'm like, the one to drive is everyone to take care and protect everyone. And you take that away, I don't know, even when I'm at that age, it's going to be tough. Also, things like loss of balance and independent living by stage 4 and 5 are almost impossible. Things like, now you're going to get susceptible to falling. My mother, we spent $12,000 the last year paying individuals who I don't want to call caregivers because they were just nice people, but they weren't trained. And I just wanted to make sure she didn't fall. But then the delusions and hallucinations made her fear them. So she actually called the police. We had to take the phone out. Again, we don't have the time. There's so many things that are tragic from Parkinson's that people just aren't aware. And then finally, the last stage, which is where you'll see the delusions, hallucinations, the loss of smell. I could have a whole show about constipation and how the gut is destroyed, other things. But the only reason I was bringing that up is you mentioned masking, which I had a whole show on, is one of the individuals from Canada who was on, who a dear friend Barbara, she talked about that, and that was, it's just another symptom that we don't really kind of address all the time.
Yeah. Well, and everyone, listeners, when this episode is done, please go listen to that episode, because I think it's really easy. We just in general, we can often get stuck on the really big, scary things that need to be attended to, because if we fall, we could die, right? So it's really important to talk about and to treat those symptoms and to try to improve that and improve your safety. So as families, yes, that's front and center. As someone who's experiencing Parkinson's disease or something similar, because we know that there are other disorders that can have Parkinsonism that may or may not respond to similar treatments and modalities. But as we are dealing with the big issues, I think opportunities that we have, like you and I have today, to have this conversation and bring up the little things are also really important, because those are likely not the things that are going to be brought up during the appointment with your neurologist. And it's really important to be seeing your neurologist and treating the big things. Bring up the little things because, many of us really love having those conversations because we know, yes, our bread and butter is to deal with these things. But when we talk about things like masking, that is a weight off of the patient's and caregiver's shoulders because they say, okay, so that's what that is. It's not that they're mad at me. It's not that they're not listening to me, because in their day in, day out lives, that can be really important. Or saying to someone early on in their illness, talking about things like sleep paralysis. Right? Are you waking up feeling paralyzed, which may have been going on for years, long before any motor symptoms of Parkinson's happened, and they didn't understand why it was happening, but it's really scary when it happens. So to talk about that, or to talk about the opposite, when someone is not paralyzed as they should be during sleep, and they're actually acting out their dreams, which can be dangerous and needs to be treated. Again, if we don't talk about, these REM behavior sleep disorders as much as we talk about the other issues of Parkinson's, we're really missing opportunities to improve patients' lives.
Yeah, and there's a lot of. I have a blog with a young lady who actually lost her husband due to Alzheimer's on the same day I lost my mother due to Parkinson's. I don't know how we met, but we become bonded. I love her, but it's important, and we call it tackling tough topics. And what it is it's a blog about the toughest topics that people don't want to talk about. So we've talked about death with dignity, medical marijuana, all the topics that I think need to be talked about. And I wish, again, I wasn't aware. And now today I am. But, some people, it's like the stigma. It's also a good topic I just thought of we need to do is the misconceptions of Parkinson's, where used to be called the elderly man disease. Well, today a big issue is women and Parkinson's. I've actually done 5 shows in a row now, just highlighting women, Parkinson's, whether it's menstruation, which I never thought I'd talk about, even sexual issues, also pregnancy, which is so important. I mean, there are women who are pregnant with Parkinson's have no clue about that. So that's why, and I love the shows because you're hearing from the people going through it, or loved ones, or have it. It's like, it's not just me. I can only talk about my mother and my experiences, but hearing from others is so important. And then the other thing is very important is that there's just so many things after to cover, and as you see today, it's a little time, but we need to talk about these things, or they'll stay almost like a stigma, and we'll never address them.
I fully agree. That's the key to destigmatizing, is to have these discussions. We all have bodies, right? And that's one of the first things you learn in medical school is it's just a body. All of those things that maybe you've been nervous to discuss, or you thought was, had a stigma around it and you can't discuss it, let go of that, because we're all humans living this human experience. And if your patient comes to you with a concern, you got to be able to hear it and discuss it unjudgmentally, and really lean into this joined human experience, learn along the way, and serve your patients the best that you can, and your community the best you can. That's why I love having conversations like this, because we can learn so much from you and from your mother, from your experience, so that if a physician or a nurse or a physician's assistant is listening, that might alter how they view how they are going to show up for interactions with caregivers and patients who have Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to get into even while you're talking, thinking of other areas. One is, I always say I would like to coin the term, if it doesn't exist, called I felt like I had secondary Parkinson's. So obviously I didn't have the diagnosis, but I was literally holding my mother's hand through the whole battle and journey to the end. Before I was a caregiver and advocate, my whole career was geared more around the criminal justice system. My dream was, as an advocate my whole life, to aid individuals who lost their loved ones due to crime or murder. My dissertation, again, I'm a police officer today, reserve. I'm also an attorney in Florida and Washington, D.C., but my dissertation and PhD were on aiding African American mothers who lost their loved ones due to murder in West Palm Beach, Florida. And a lot of the problem in the criminal justice system is that often you have a loved one who's no longer with us due to crime, but then the family members become secondary victims, and kind of correlate that to Parkinson's and awareness, because a lot of time family members are often kind of left out or forgotten. And then you see my mother passed, unfortunately, and then I feel still, in a way, left out. So thankfully, I was able to think of Together for Sharon, created our own world. It's almost becoming too big. It's just me. So it's like, not like everyone writes me and says, "This is amazing. You must be a huge," or I'm like, "No, it's just me." I respond within like a minute to everyone on social media. I just try my best to be there to be a voice and to support people. I don't really give, advice. I just try to share stories. And that's what leads me to an exciting announcement that I told you is my second book in this area of Parkinson's disease. I've written other books out of this area, but it's actually going to be released, I hope, in the next 2 weeks or this month in September. It's called, it's more like an interview book, but it's called Voices of Resilience, Conversations with Parkinson's Disease Warriors, Caretakers, and Advocates. And basically the quick story is, when my mother passed, I was still today heartbroken. I'm still grieving, and I want to thank you and your audience again for this opportunity, because it helps me grieve even now, many years later. I think that's why I do advocate more than, because that helps me. It makes me have some kind of hope that others won't have to go through this. But I wouldn't lie if I could say I'd like to shut it all down and find a cure. But the so for 2 3 years I was just sad. I was advocating, but just for my mother and me. Then all of a sudden I was hit with, like, it felt like a brick or something, like an anvil in the cartoons, and found out there wasn't just 1 million people in the U.S. There were 10 million around the world. I'm like, this is nuts. So I decided to go on my own, embark on a new journey. And I realized it's not just about me and my mother anymore. At that point, it was about everyone. And I will always go to them thinking and knowing that we have to be a family in this fight. So I decided to start sharing others' journeys, and I thought it'd be a few, and that would be it. Well, I'm proud to say, as of today, it's been almost 1,000 journeys, and I've had about 800 completely free online. I did all the work completely free, nothing, no money for a penny or for any of it. And I decided that, let's share other journeys. So I spoke to individuals from Spain, Italy, France, England, I mean, even Nova Scotia, Iceland, even people. I found Parkinson's, unfortunately, doesn't discriminate. So I offered them all online for free. And that was just a different birth of something so special. And those people around the world now become family. It's almost funny. I don't like WhatsApp, the app. No offense to WhatsApp. We don't want to be sued, but I actually have it because some of the closest people now are in, like, Sweden and Australia, and they're texting me late at night. But their time, I can't get the time zones with all these places. So anyway, just to finish that story, I decided finally this summer to release 200 of the first, journeys. So it's just beautiful because now you'll hear from those individuals. I provide their information, so you can skip me if you don't want to hear me and go right directly to them and ask questions. And it's just a beautiful thing, I think. I'm hoping to offer the ebook completely free. The soft cover will be a charge just because it's color pictures, which is not. I was told to use black and white, but I didn't want it. If you're going to do this, you have to, even if I don't sell a copy, you have to do it right. I don't want to think it gives justice to people just to keep black and white. So anyway, that's going to be, it's the first set. I think there might be 4 to 5 more coming. I'm only doing it once every summer because it's a lot of, it's cost me a tremendous amount of time, but money is the problem. And it kind of pushes me to someday think maybe I'll bring this to a foundation, but it's not the same joy for me if this is going to become about, money and raising for myself. But I do have one wish, and that's to raise money for future neurologists, oddly, to help fund a scholarship so that future individuals, medical school, can concentrate on Parkinson's and find a cure for research. So that's one thing I just can't do without a foundation. So we could do it. Right now I have 3 children, my wife, family. I do this all full time and have a job. So right now it's not the time, but I'd rather they find a cure. I don't have to do this. So.
Wow. I mean, you are doing so many amazing things, and so many things I want to respond to. I think it's so important that you are sharing these voices, because I do think in Parkinson's, it's not uncommon for people to feel that they're losing their voice. They're losing their place in the world, and you're gifting that to them, and you're sharing it even more widely than maybe their life before Parkinson's would have allowed them to share that story. So thank you so much for doing that. It's so beautiful. If anyone is listening to this episode and you know someone who knows how to start a Kickstarter campaign, or who has a just burning urge to help with this mission and, take on some of this to make it even bigger, let us know, reach out to George. And I'm happy to pass along a message too, because this is a really big organizational movement to try to give people these voices and to share them with the world. And the work you're doing is so important. I just am so grateful for you doing it.
I appreciate it. And again, without your support and your audience, I wouldn't probably be able to, because it's, tough day still. But I get a little bit of me, something inside the stomach or heart gets excited to be able to share. Even now, about my mother, and she lives on through everyone else. So that's really all I want. There are people, again, and like you, that we do things sometimes just because we want to help people, and we want nothing in return. My dream someday, I always thought maybe someone somewhere will be listening, and I would love to make the book into a documentary about my mother, but I did take video and film of her last year, which I never really wanted to share because it's just not what I wanted her to be remembered. But for medical science and just to share her story, I'd probably think about it. But I also wouldn't accept a penny for it. I just feel that right now, as we sit here, there's really not many documentaries, sadly, at all for Parkinson's. And you can see, I hate to keep saying sadly, but sadly again, it's becoming a national topic finally. The national plan to end Parkinson's disease passed a month ago through the Senate and House unanimously, and President Biden signed it into law just a month ago. I was a part of that out of the state of Florida, and that's the first, which is sad, but how could it be? It's the first bill in U.S. history to help support and fund research for Parkinson's disease and a cure. But the work though isn't ended. Now it starts because now it's passed. We have to implement it, but it's so important. But we just don't have enough. And just last week, the famous actor Ryan Reynolds I say, came out, and he talked about his father who had Parkinson's, but how bad the hallucinations and delusions were. Well, that sparked a new conversation that no one ever really talked about with Parkinson's. And also, we had a lot of national attention whether the president has Parkinson's. I don't really care about all that, but just that knowing that the word Parkinson's disease is now at the tip of people's tongues is important because, again, it brings awareness. So I don't know if it's the timing or what's happening in society, but it is either growing or individuals such as celebrities are getting more involved, and that's something important. I reached out to a lot of media, a lot of celebrities, and don't get a lot of responses because it's just me. I'm just one person, but I think again, if someone out there listening, I'm always happy to talk and just keep this going and push forward. And the good thing is, before the world of advocacy and Parkinson's, the word no has never worked for me. I'm proud to say I'm aggressive, but the good thing is the aggression is all positive and all because I love everyone, and I send my love to everyone, and I just want you to know you're never alone.
That is such a beautiful message. And your advocacy, as you said, really has done amazing things with this new law that's passed, as you said, on July 2nd of 2024, to really help us work towards a cure. And as you said, it's wonderful that the hard work that you and the Michael J. Fox Foundation and many other advocates have done have led to this being made into law. And now we have to make it something really actionable. We have to follow up on it. And I know that yourself and others are going to be working hard to do that. And we're here certainly as a resource. And also, George, could you share with our audience how they can contact you to support your cause, to learn more about Parkinson's disease and advocacy for caregivers and patients living with Parkinson's?
Yeah, I want to thank you and your audience again. Today means the world to me. And this is not a place where we have to end the conversation. We have to share this and then share it again and share it with a friend, share it with people who don't have Parkinson's and aren't aware. Because together, again, it's going to change the world for so many. You can reach me at Together for Sharon. It's spelled out Together, FORSHARON.com. Now, if you type it in, I was surprised it comes up all over the place. I also have, if you go on the main page, scroll down, you'll see a little Christmas, or it's a tree. It looked to me, Christmas tree. And then you click that and you'll get right to every single one of our social media. I'm on every one. I try to post several times a day, not to bother anyone, but to keep pushing, keep fighting. And you can purchase the book on our website. If you go to togetherforsharon.com, click About Us, and you'll see the book, and you'll probably see the other books. And hopefully the ebook for the new book will be completely free, which is really something I'm trying, which is, I hope I don't regret it, because it's cost me tremendous just to get it. But I just feel it needs to be out there, and it's going to go around the world, because about 100 out of the 200 are from around the other countries in the U.S. So I wanted everyone to have a copy, and I thought I can't really pay for a copy for everyone and send it. I mean, I wanted to send one of my journey books to a friend in Australia, and they said it's like $45. And I'm like, unfortunately, I couldn't do it. But I do have one last message for everyone and you. We love you. We support you. We care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with Dr. Shafer, will advocate for you, and together I feel our voices are so much stronger. And I always kind of, in a way, joke, but I say I'm just getting started, because even today it's been a tough day. Even though it's Labor Day, I worked all since 6 a.m. and I'll be going right back to work. I've been advocating all day and I love it. But there's days where I kind of feel, whether I have one negative person, I get kind of sad a little, and like I want to share their story. Or maybe I see a friend that has Parkinson's now is battling, and it's just kind of heartbreaking and brings me back to moments of my mother. Or I had the honor to meet Michael J. Fox, and seeing him kind of still, I don't know today if you saw, but recently he was on stage with Coldplay, the famous band. Michael J. Fox is now in a wheelchair. So these are the things that, kind of push me back. But then seeing you and your audience push me forward and kind of re-energize me to need to keep fighting. So I just, again, so grateful for your time, your friendship, and everyone listening too. We send our love.
Thank you so much, George. And everyone, please, we're going to put the information in the show notes. So again, he's shared all the information with you, but it will be there online. Just click it and go and support his movement to try to help people understand what Parkinson's is, how greatly it affects people and their caregivers, and how we can all help in educating, advocating, and supporting everyone on this journey, and hopefully moving towards a cure for Parkinson's disease. Thank you so much for being here. It has been such a blessing to get to have this conversation with you and learn about your story. And I want to thank our listeners for being here too. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.